PlayStation executive defends layoff, says they were necessary to run a business. I'm going to stop right here. So, this will be the last article we're covering today, but this is about Hermen Hulst. And I'm just going to go ahead and, I've got an article where we already covered, it's on the YouTube page. So another YouTube video where we cover discussing and reading about Hermen Hulst and how Concord was apparently his baby. Concord was his baby, and it was, in his mind, his Star Wars. Concord was Hermen Hulst's Star Wars. It was going to make him incredibly, I don't know, famous for being this franchise and IP and universe of something of a modern Star Wars for Sony and for himself, right? And so the other thing that we found out whenever we were reading about all that was that apparently he had cultivated a theme of toxic positivity around that project. And if you don't know what toxic positivity is, that means that the only things that you're allowed to say about something are positive things, right? You can't say anything negative. You can't say any kind of constructive criticism, or else you'll get shunned for it, or even worse, potentially. So apparently there was a really, really terrible theme of toxic positivity cultivated around this project, and from the top down, because it was Hermen Hulst. And now look what happens, right? So I'll tell you right away, any kind of company or developer project that isn't willing to listen to constructive criticism, to feedback about how things could potentially be better, that's a terrible developer, right? It's a terrible project. It'll probably not end up being very good. It's just the way it is. If you're not willing to listen to a feedback process and pick out where the majority of that feedback are pinpointing certain things that probably need to be adjusted or changed or incorporated, what have you, you are missing, and you're gonna fail probably. And so right here we're dealing with Hermen Hulst in this situation, and then what's the outcome of this, right? The outcome is this toxic positive culture around this project leads to a game that nobody really cared to play. It's the biggest modern flop in video games, at a budget of roughly, what we're hearing is $400 million. And then what happens? Hermen Hulst, who sits at the top of Sony, gets to go, oh, well, see ya, Firewalk, and lay off everybody, shutter the studio, lay off a bunch of people, and then still sit there at the top padding his pockets, right? Whenever this was, from what it sounds like, and I'm not internal to this process, but from what it sounds like a lot of this was his doing. A lot of this was his, he made this game become a flop, really. Because of the way that he wouldn't let anybody say anything bad or give any kind of constructive criticism as feedback or anything. And then it turns into this. And then everybody else that had to sit there and deal with this situation of working on this game and this toxic positive culture that had to be terrible to deal with, now they're stuck with no jobs. And the person that made all this happen in the first place is still at the top of this company and the studio, right? That's terrible. It's terrible. We see it happen all the time. But, there's no repercussions for somebody like that doing that kind of thing. then they just go, well, you know, the layoffs were necessary to keep the business going. They don't, you know, cop up to any kind of, you know, wrongdoing on their part. What they, you know, could have done better. What they are doing to try and, you know, save people's jobs. Because ultimately, it sounds like this is mostly their fault. Because as again, this was something that was, you know, forced on the, you know, the studio from the top down as to what needed to be done here and how to do things. And I'm not saying that Hermen Hulst is probably the only person that is responsible for this, but it sounds quite like he was, you know, the biggest catalyst behind this toxic positive culture, you know, and what was going on here. PlayStation executive defends layoffs, says they were necessary to run a business. It's our duty to look at our resource planning and make sure that we run a sustainable business. It's been tough times of late at Sony Interactive Entertainment as the PlayStation company began the year by cutting 900 jobs and canceling games. In July, Sony axed a number of positions from its Destiny studio, Bungie. Man, that one's going down quick. And announced a reorganization effort there. Then in August, Sony's Firewalk team launched a multiplayer FPS called Concord, only to close it quickly and offer refunds before the studio itself shut down for good after reportedly spending $200 million plus on it. We heard closer to $400 million. In an interview with Variety, SIE co-CEO Hermen Hulst reacted to these dramatic moves, saying they all took place as part of the company's effort to run a sustainable business. Quote, I will say a few things on that. It's our duty to look at our resource planning and make sure that we run a sustainable business, he said. That's part of being CEO. We never take that lightly because we know these people personally. It's very close to our hearts and the teams and good working atmospheres. But yes, we've had some layoffs. Hulst went on to say that PlayStation Studios division is actually much greater today in terms of employment numbers than it was 5 years ago. Grown tremendously, and that is organic growth that our existing teams, I think, hired quite aggressively, as well as through mergers and acquisitions, he said. Hulst's defense of Sony's major cuts sounds similar to what Microsoft gaming CEO Phil Spencer said about Xbox's own dramatic business shifts that included 2,500 plus layoffs in the past year and numerous studio closures. In March, Spencer said the initial round of job cuts announced in January was necessary to help Xbox become a profitable business following the blockbuster buyout of Activision Blizzard. 2024, like last year, has been a brutal for layoffs in the video game developers and staff at Sony, Microsoft, Ubisoft, and many other companies. Some estimates suggest there have been more than 11,000 layoffs in the video game sector in this year alone. There's been well over that. I'll pull it up. Is this it? Is this the right one? Yep. We're at 13,000 now. This is a website that tracks it. You can see right here, we're at 13,000 layoffs in the industry this year. Last year, there's a total of 10,500. Boom. So this year, we're not even finished with this year yet, and we've already surpassed last year. 2022, 8,500. So it's getting worse and worse and worse, right? 2022 was 8,500. 2023 was 3,000 more than that. This year, we're on track for at least 3,000 more than last year. So basically increasing by 3,000 more layoffs every year is what it looks like. A former PlayStation executive recently shared his thoughts on the cuts, claiming they are not due to corporate greed alone, but are instead part of general macroeconomic conditions. This executive, Chris Deering, was roundly criticized for saying people who have been laid off can just go to the beach for a year. Yeah, we covered that one. A labor union, the Communication Workers of America, recently criticized Sony's decision to close Firewalk and shut down Concord, lamenting the kinds of decisions made by highly insulated video game CEOs. Yup, this is exactly it. This is what I was getting at. Yeah. So again, this is exactly the way I feel about this. From everything that we've heard about who Hermen Hulst is, the effect he had on this project, which was very impactful, I do feel, from everything that we know. He still gets to sit at the top and then fire everybody at Firewalk, you know? Where's the accountability? That's really where this needs to be. I want to see more of that in the industry, you know? Accountability from the top. If the top down can make decisions, you know, and you know, most of those people at the top in these companies, these big major companies anymore, don't really know what video games are about. Let's be quite fair here. They want to act like they know what entertainment is and what video games are, but they don't actually know what video gaming is about, right? That's why we see so many of them fail nowadays. And they sit at the top and they push their, you know, agendas about what they know is best and how to make games that are going to be good, how to make universes like Concord that are going to be the new Star Wars. And then when that fails, who pays the price? Not them, right? It's the people under them. The accountability not being there is terrible. It sucks. And it's tough to watch this happen all the time.